when my wife, Abigail, and I discovered the cul-de-sac on Riverleaf Lane. It felt like stepping into an old postcard. Meticulously trimmed lawns, symmetrical maple trees, and gentle evening light casting a welcoming glow upon each front porch. We've been searching for a peaceful neighborhood to raise our two children, Landon, 14, and Emma, 10, and to serve as a home base in between my overseas deployments. I'm Colonel Samuel Sam Beckett, a career officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. For the better part of 2 decades, I've moved from base to base, state to state, occasionally overseas for tours that tested my leadership and resolve. As I climbed the ranks, it became more pressing to find a stable environment for my family. Riverleaf Lane in the Fairwood Greens subdivision seemed idyllic, quiet, close to good schools, and boasting a small but close-knit retired military community. However, I soon learned that behind the manicured hedges and bright floral wreaths, Fairwood Greens was ruled by an HOA with a fearsome reputation, particularly by its middle-aged board president, Tina Roswell, though the entire neighborhood often whispered about her as Karen. She was known for her intrusive oversight, relentless fines, and an unshakable belief that her authority eclipsed all else. The rumors seemed a bit exaggerated at first, and I reasoned we could handle a stringent HOA if it meant living in a tidy, safe suburb. How wrong I was. This is the chronicle of how Karen overreached in the most outlandish way possible, hiring fake military police to illegally evict veterans from her domain, and of her downfall when she targeted the wrong house, a home belonging to me, an active-duty Marine colonel. We moved in during late spring. The sky was a cloudless blue as the moving trucks parked outside our new home, a charming 2-story with a wraparound porch nestled between 2 retired couples who greeted us with warm welcomes. As I supervised the movers, I spotted a stern-looking woman approaching on the sidewalk. She was in her mid-50s, with neatly cropped dark hair, wearing pressed khakis and a lilac blouse. Under her arm was a thick binder labeled Fairwood Greens, HOA Regulations. Her posture and manner reminded me of a garrison officer on inspection day. "Good afternoon," she called, forcing a tight smile. "I'm Tina Roswell, but most folks call me Karen." She offered a handshake that felt more like a silent test than a friendly greeting. "President of the Fairwood Greens HOA Board. Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Roswell," I said politely, shaking her hand. "I'm Sam Beckett, and this is my wife, Abigail. We're just getting settled." Karen's gaze swept over the boxes, the truck, and at last, landed on me with a faint air of suspicion. "Wonderful. We pride ourselves on a well-regulated community. I see you have some furniture on the lawn. Please note there's a 48-hour limit for any items stored publicly. Just a friendly reminder to avoid complications." "Understood," I replied. "The movers will have it all inside by this evening." She nodded curtly, then extended the binder. "Here are our rules and covenants. Please read them carefully, and if you have any questions, direct them to me or the board. We enforce all regulations without exception." Abigail offered a tight smile. "We appreciate that. Thanks." The woman glanced at Landon and Emma, who were helping carry lighter items. She gave them a quick, distant nod, then pivoted sharply on her heel, striding away. I couldn't help feeling an immediate sense of unease. Abigail looked at me, brow furrowed. "She's strict." I shrugged. "We're used to strict. I've served under commanding officers with stiffer posture." Still, a small voice in the back of my mind warned me that the rumored Karen might become a real thorn in our side if we weren't careful. Over the following 2 weeks, we unpacked. I began my routine of commuting to the nearby Marine Corps base for daily duties. Abigail found a job teaching at the local middle school, while our kids transitioned into their new classes. At first, the neighborhood felt peaceful. We met a few longtime residents, a friendly older couple who'd retired from the Army, another family whose father had served in the Navy. They all seemed welcoming, sharing tips about local shops and inviting us over for barbecue. Yet Karen's presence loomed. She was often seen strolling the sidewalks with her phone or a clipboard, making notes about people's yards, measuring the height of shrubs, or even peeking over fences. Several neighbors politely warned us about her constant vigilance. One older gentleman, Mr. Davies, a retired Air Force mechanic, confided that he'd been fined multiple times for unsightly lawn ornaments that no one else found problematic. Another neighbor said Karen had threatened them with legal action for painting their mailbox an unauthorized shade of beige. Despite her overbearing approach, I tried to stay on Karen's good side. I pruned the lawn meticulously, kept the trash cans in the garage except on collection day, and read over the HOA guidelines to avoid petty conflicts. My marine discipline came in handy, but the more I saw of Karen's enforcement style, the more I sensed an underlying hostility, especially toward the older veterans in the area. It was as though she viewed them as relics, obstacles in the way of her perfect neighborhood aesthetic. I soon noticed a pattern. Many veterans on our street seemed to be under constant scrutiny by Karen. For instance, Mr. Davies once installed a small U.S. Air Force retired plaque on his front porch, only to receive a violation notice claiming the sign disrupted the uniform look of the homes. Another neighbor, Ms. Johnson, a retired Navy nurse, complained that Karen had insisted her service dog was excessive because Ms. Johnson didn't appear disabled. At a small weekend barbecue hosted by Mr. Davies, I listened as half a dozen retired service members shared their frustrations. She keeps implying we don't fit her vision of a modern, upscale community, Ms. Johnson said bitterly. She's always picking fights over the slightest thing. My small flag in the flower bed was apparently too large or too bright. Then she threatened to fine me for having an American flag displayed outside the designated holiday periods. I frowned, feeling my hackles rise. That's absurd. Doesn't the law protect the display of U.S. flags? Mr. Davies nodded. Federal law does, but the HOA here tries to circumvent it with vague rules. Most of us pay the fines or comply just to avoid more trouble. But why? I asked. Why is she so fixated on you folks, specifically? A subdued murmur spread. Finally, Ms. Johnson offered. We suspect she wants to push out the older residents and military retirees. She's rumored to want younger families with deeper pockets to keep property values sky high. And we're easy targets because many of us are on fixed incomes or not up to legal battles. Her words lingered in my mind. I felt an instinctive urge to stand up for them, but I also didn't want to paint a giant target on my own back. Still, ignoring Karen's tyranny entirely seemed wrong. One morning, about a month after moving in, I saw two men in camouflage uniforms, not standard-issue Marine or Army gear, walking around the neighborhood. They wore patches that read military police, yet their attire looked suspiciously off-brand. Their haircuts were unkempt for supposed military personnel, and they carried themselves in a way that lacked the distinctive discipline I was used to seeing among actual MPs. I was heading to my car when these two men approached a house down the street, a small ranch owned by Mr. Walker, an 82-year-old retired Marine gunnery sergeant. Mr. Walker had difficulty walking, using a cane, but he was a cheerful man who still wore his Semper Fi baseball cap with pride. The two MPs stood on Mr. Walker's porch, demanding entrance. I overheard them saying something about HOA compliance and violation of housing codes, subject to immediate eviction. My ears perked up. Military police do not handle civilian housing evictions. Not to mention, an HOA has no authority to forcibly evict someone without going through civil courts. Alarmed, I jogged over. Excuse me, I called. What's going on here? One man turned sharply. His uniform lacked the usual name tapes on the chest, and the MP patch was a cheap embroidered piece, not official. Stand back, he snarled. We're authorized by the Homeowners Association to remove unauthorized residents. Mr. Walker gripped his cane, confused. I haven't done anything. My mortgage is paid off. I own this home free and clear. The second man threatened. Failure to comply will result in charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We have the authority to remove you from the premises. My eyes narrowed. There's no scenario where HOA issues or civilian housing disputes fall under the UCMJ. I'm a U.S. Marine colonel, active duty. Show me your credentials. The men exchanged a startled glance. Then the first one snapped. You have no business interfering. This is an HOA matter. Step aside. I stepped forward, producing my own military ID. Here's my official identification. Let's see yours. They stiffened. We don't have to show you anything. But they looked rattled. The second man mumbled something about coming back later, and the two quickly retreated, heading off on foot. I stared after them, heart pounding. Fake MPs? Had I really just witnessed men impersonating military police to bully an elderly veteran? Mr. Walker was shaken. Son, What the devil was that about? I gently guided him inside. I don't know yet, but it's not legitimate. No Real MP does this. I'll figure it out. Meanwhile, if they come back, call me or the local police immediately. He nodded, eyes wide with confusion. I left his home simmering with anger and suspicion that Karen was behind the ruse. That evening, I recounted the incident to Abigail over dinner. She set down her fork in horror. Are you sure they were impersonating MPs? As sure as I can be, I replied. Their uniforms were wrong. They gave no official ID, and they used threats that made no sense. Real MPs can't just walk into a civilian neighborhood and evict someone. Abigail's eyes flickered with concern. Then, Karen must have hired these imposters. But why? To scare older veterans, maybe. I speculated, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. She might be aiming to get them out so she can replace them with new buyers willing to pay higher prices or follow her draconian rules without complaint. Abigail leaned forward. This is beyond petty fines. It's criminal. Impersonating military personnel is a serious federal offense, right? I nodded grimly. Yes. If proven, it can lead to prison time. The question is how to prove it's Karen's doing. I can't accuse her without evidence. The next day, I reached out to the local police to report the suspicious men. An officer took down my statement but admitted that without more details, like a license plate or confirmed identity, pursuing them would be difficult. However, they did confirm that no legitimate branch of the armed forces had authorized any such activity in our area. I also quietly contacted a friend, Captain Joel Serrano, who served in the local Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCS, office. I explained the situation in broad strokes, emphasizing the suspicious impersonation. He promised to keep an ear out for any official complaints or leads. Meanwhile, life in Fairwood Greens continued. Kids going to school, neighbors quietly living their routines. But a palpable tension radiated from the older veterans. Rumors circulated of military cops harassing them at odd hours, pounding on doors and citing HOA code violations. None had been forcibly removed yet, but the intimidation was real. A few had even considered selling their homes just to escape the stress. 3 weeks later, another confrontation erupted, this time on Ms. Johnson's property. She'd recently put up a tasteful gold star plaque in memory of her late husband, a Navy officer. The two phony MPs showed up again, claiming the plaque violated federal guidelines on home decor near naval bases. Ms. Johnson suspected a scam but was frightened, given they wore pseudo-uniforms and threatened her with charges. By the time I arrived, she'd called me in a panic. The men were gone, but Ms. Johnson was trembling in her living room. I don't want to lose my house, she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. I can't handle any more of Karen's bullying. She's behind this. Who else would orchestrate it? I patted her shoulder gently. You won't lose your house. These men have zero authority. I'll do everything I can to stop them. Yet frustration gnawed at me. Without catching them in the act, it was tough to gather evidence. Karen remained outwardly calm, continuing her usual HOA duties, sending petty violation notices, calling out paint color mismatches, hosting rigid board meetings. No one had direct proof linking her to the fake MPs. Some neighbors suggested we collectively confront her, but they feared retaliation. To galvanize the community, I began discreetly collecting statements from each victimized veteran, detailing how these men had tried to forcibly remove them or threaten them with nonsense military regulations. I compiled times, descriptions, partial license plates if any neighbor saw them arrive. The puzzle pieces started to align, though I still lacked the smoking gun. Amid these tensions, Karen maintained her charade of community leadership. She circulated a new bylaw proposal that would allow the HOA to conduct exterior property inspections for violations with minimal notice. The measure essentially granted the HOA board the right to enter people's yards and photograph anything deemed non-compliant. Many neighbors balked, but Karen insisted it was necessary for property value protection. Meanwhile, I noticed that some residents, especially younger or more affluent ones, seemed to side with Karen or at least remain indifferent. She charmed them with promises of elevating the neighborhood's prestige. But the older veterans felt singled out and cornered. The tension soared. Finally, one Saturday, Mr. Davies asked if I'd speak at an informal gathering of concerned neighbors, mostly retired service members, plus a few supportive families. We met on Ms. Johnson's back patio, away from prying eyes. They asked me to use my active duty connections to expose the fraud. My rank as a Marine colonel gave me some credibility and resources, but I also had to tread carefully. My official capacity didn't extend to investigating civilian matters on a whim. Nevertheless, I agreed to help. I shared what I'd learned, urged them to file police reports, and promised to remain vigilant. Perhaps if we could catch these fake MPs in the act, we'd have leverage to implicate Karen. Our chance came sooner than expected. Just a week later, Ms. Johnson called me, voice trembling. "They're back, Colonel Beckett. The imposters are outside, demanding I open the door." My pulse thudded. I told her to stay calm, dial the real police, and keep them talking. I sprinted from my house, cell phone in hand. Ms. Johnson lived 2 blocks away, and as I raced through the quiet suburban street, a half-moon provided the only light. I glimpsed the men standing on her porch, wearing the same suspicious MP getup. They had no official vehicle, just a dark sedan parked at the curb. Crouching behind a hedge, I called 911, giving the dispatcher a hushed update. Impersonation of military police, potential harassment in progress. Then, I stealthily recorded the scene on my phone as best I could. The men rapped on Ms. Johnson's door, threatening arrest if she didn't comply with immediate eviction orders. They brandished phony documents that supposedly granted them power to remove her from the premises. No local judge, no legitimate authority, had ever served Ms. Johnson with an eviction. This was pure intimidation. As I documented the confrontation, I noticed a small silhouette further down the sidewalk. The shape was feminine, Karen herself, half hidden behind a hedge, whispering into her phone. The pit of my stomach churned. I inched closer, still unseen. Karen's voice carried faintly in the still air. "Yes, carry it out now. No, they won't fight if they think it's real. Just do it fast." She paused, listening. "If the old bat calls the cops, you have time to get away. I'm telling you, we need her gone. She's behind on dues. Her house is a blight." She ended the call. I realized with a surge of triumph and rage that I had just overheard Karen directing the imposters to forcibly remove Ms. Johnson. At that moment, a siren wailed in the distance. Police cruisers approaching. Karen stiffened, looked around, then scurried off into the shadows. The 2 fake MPs, hearing the sirens, rushed to their sedan. One of them spotted me as I emerged from behind a bush, phone raised. He cursed, jumped in the driver's seat, and they sped off. The local cops arrived seconds later, lights flashing, but the imposters had disappeared into the darkness. Ms. Johnson opened her door carefully, relief flooding her face. Although we hadn't caught them physically, I had footage, plus that snippet of Karen's voice instructing them. It wasn't conclusive proof of her involvement. My phone audio was muffled. Still, it was far more than we'd had before. I spent the next day reaching out to Captain Serrano at NCIS, sending him the phone video. He agreed it looked suspiciously like an organized scam. He recommended we also contact the local FBI office, as impersonating federal military personnel might fall under their jurisdiction. This had grown beyond a local police matter, especially if interstate elements or financial fraud were involved. While formal agencies considered how to proceed, neighbors were abuzz with talk of the near-eviction fiasco. Ms. Johnson, though shaken, resolved not to be intimidated. Word spread that Karen had lurked nearby while the incident happened, fueling suspicions. Meanwhile, Karen acted as though nothing had happened. She posted on the HOA bulletin about unrest caused by trespassers and threatened to increase neighborhood security measures, hinting that we needed more robust enforcement. It was a brazen move, like she was doubling down on her attempts at intimidation, determined not to appear rattled. I recognized a pattern. The more pushback Karen faced, the more desperate and grandiose her tactics became. It was a matter of time before her plan imploded. I just needed to ensure that final implosion happened under the watchful eyes of law enforcement, so she could never terrorize veterans again. A few days later, an air of unease pervaded Fairwood Greens. Then, late one afternoon, Karen made her boldest and most foolhardy move yet. 2 neighbors reported seeing a trio of suspicious vehicles in the area, each carrying men wearing mismatched camo uniforms marked MP. At the same time, multiple veterans along Riverleaf Lane received formal-looking notices pinned to their doors. The notices read, "By order of the Fairwood Greens Homeowners Association and the United States Military Police, you are required to vacate this property within 72 hours due to repeated HOA violations and threats to community security. Failure to comply will result in immediate forced removal under Military Code Section 8.04. The reference to a fictitious Military Code Section 8.04 was laughable to anyone with real knowledge of the law, but it terrified some older folks. Even Mr. Walker called me, voice shaking, to ask if the Marine Corps could truly evict him from a home he fully owned. My fury soared. Karen was orchestrating a mass eviction attempt of the veterans, none of which held any legal ground, but could cause panic. I immediately contacted the local police and updated Captain Serrano. This time, we had widespread distribution of identical fake notices. That alone was strong evidence of a coordinated scheme. We also had witness accounts of MPs delivering them. The official agencies moved more swiftly now. They realized the impersonation ring had escalated to a large-scale fraud attempt. My own household was not exempt from the fiasco. That same evening, I stepped outside to find an eviction notice pinned to my front door. It bore the same nonsensical Military Code Section 8.04 language, claiming I had 72 hours to vacate for gross violations. The irony: I was an active-duty Marine colonel receiving a bogus eviction notice from MPs that obviously had no real authority. Beyond anger, I felt a grim sense of opportunity. By directly threatening me, a recognized active-duty officer, Karen and her cronies stepped onto extremely dangerous legal ground. Impersonating military personnel is one thing. Using that impersonation to threaten and attempt eviction of an actual Marine colonel drastically raises the stakes. I carefully photographed every detail, preserving chain-of-custody evidence. Then I phoned the local police, clarifying my status, and reached out again to the FBI's local field office. My NCIS contact had suggested them. The special agent in charge sounded keenly interested when I mentioned active-duty Marine targeted by fake MPs. He set up an in-person meeting the next day. As I locked my door that night, I felt both tension and anticipation swirling. I had no intention of leaving my property. If Karen tried to force me out physically, she'd be greeted by a real officer of the law and possibly real MP backup from the local Marine base. We were nearing the endgame. The next day, I met with Special Agent Dana Whitfield at the FBI's regional office. She was a calm, methodical professional with a background in financial crimes, who had also worked cases involving stolen valor and impersonation of military personnel. She studied the eviction notices, my phone videos, neighbor statements, and the audio snippet of Karen's voice. Agent Whitfield's brow furrowed as the pieces fell into place. "There's a strong suggestion of conspiracy here," she said, flipping through the documents. "We have a group of individuals impersonating military police, presumably at the behest of this HOA president, Ms. Roswell, Karen. She stands to benefit by scaring older homeowners into leaving, possibly reselling their homes at a profit if she's connected to local realtors or receiving kickbacks. Additionally, forging or distributing these notices claiming military authority is an interstate offense if any materials or phone calls cross state lines." I nodded. Many older neighbors already caved to her demands in smaller ways. Now, she's essentially ordering mass evictions using false UCMJ references. It's beyond a local matter. Agent Whitfield agreed, explaining the potential charges: impersonation of federal officers, fraud, extortion, conspiracy to violate civil rights. We'll need a sting operation or undeniable evidence of them posing as MPs. Also, we'll want to see if Ms. Roswell is directly paying these men and coordinating their movements. I provided contact info for neighbors who had partial license plates or had glimpsed the men entering Karen's house. The FBI would gather more evidence, hopefully culminating in warrants. Meanwhile, they advised me to remain vigilant and inform my immediate chain of command. If Karen or her fake MP squad tried to forcibly remove me, a real uniformed MP detachment might be authorized to intervene. Just 2 nights later, the confrontation I half expected arrived. It was around 8 p.m. I'd finished dinner with my family, and the kids were doing homework. That's when we heard loud knocks at the front door. Abigail and I exchanged tense glances. "This might be it," I whispered. I opened the door to find three men wearing mismatched camouflage and phony MP armbands. Behind them, in the dim porch light, I spied Karen lurking by the street, arms folded. One man thrust a paper at me. "You have 24 hours left to vacate, Colonel Beckett. We are authorized to remove you under the authority of—" I cut him off. "Under whose authority exactly?" He hesitated, then rattled off some nonsense about the HOA's partnership with the U.S. Army's enforcement branch. My anger flared. "There is no such partnership. You're impersonating military officers. That's a federal crime." Karen's voice drifted from behind them. "Do it now," she hissed. "He's obstructing enforcement." The lead imposter stepped forward, arms tensing, as if ready for a physical tussle. "Stand aside, Colonel, or we'll charge you with insubordination and remove you by force." I took a deliberate step out onto the porch. "I am an active-duty Marine colonel. You have zero authority here, and you won't be removing anyone." At that moment, headlights swept the street. Two black SUVs pulled up. Out came men and women in dark windbreakers stamped FBI, followed by local police cruisers and a pair of actual uniformed Marines from the local base's military police detachment. The whole cavalry. They fanned out with practiced efficiency, firearms at the ready but not raised, commanding everyone to freeze. Karen let out a shriek, spinning to run, but an FBI agent blocked her path. The three fake MPs stood dumbfounded before raising their hands in surrender. In seconds, the officers had them cuffed. Karen began wailing. "This is my neighborhood. I have the right." She was cut off by an agent reading her Miranda rights. The imposters were also read their rights, each stammering excuses. I stepped back, relief washing over me. My heart still hammered in my chest, but we'd done it. The ring had been caught in the act. The arrests sent shockwaves through Fairwood Greens. Neighbors emerged from their homes to witness the spectacle. Karen, once the mighty HOA president, hauled away in handcuffs. The three men, identified as local hired muscle with minimal prior military experience, faced charges of impersonating federal officers, attempted fraud, conspiracy, and more. Karen was accused of masterminding the entire scheme, paying them to remove the veterans forcibly. Days later, the local news ran the headline: HOA president arrested for hiring fake military police to evict veterans. Journalists interviewed stunned residents who described the climate of fear Karen had created. Many older veterans recounted the intimidation they'd endured. The story gained national traction, with commentary about the brazen impersonation of U.S. military personnel. Meanwhile, the FBI and local authorities uncovered further evidence. Bank transfers from Karen to the imposters, text messages detailing each planned eviction, and recordings, including the snippet I'd captured, of her instructing them. Investigators also discovered possible real estate collusion. Karen allegedly conspired with a realtor to flip the properties once the veterans were forced out. Even more incriminating was the batch of phony military eviction notices bearing her typed signature and hidden metadata. Local law enforcement praised the cooperation of concerned citizens. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Davies, and others expressed relief and gratitude. The sense of fear and oppression that had hovered over the neighborhood dissipated almost overnight. Karen's trial, bundled with the cases against her three hired imposters, proved swift and devastating. The prosecution charged her with impersonating federal law enforcement as a conspirator, fraud, multiple counts of attempted illegal eviction, harassment, and violation of civil rights, targeting protected veterans. The defendant's attorneys attempted half-hearted defenses, Karen's legal team claiming she misunderstood the men's credentials, the men claiming Karen told them it was all legitimate. The mountain of evidence told a different story. I was called to testify about the night they tried to evict me and how I recognized them as fakes. So were Ms. Johnson, Mr. Walker, and others. Each recounted the intimidation and references to fictitious military codes. Karen's face remained stony throughout, though occasionally she'd glare at me as if blaming me for her predicament. Ultimately, the jury found Karen guilty on multiple counts. The judge lambasted her actions as a grotesque abuse of power and a wanton disregard for the law and the respect owed to real military service members. In sentencing, Karen received a multi-year prison term. On top of that, the court imposed heavy financial penalties for restitution to the targeted veterans, as she had no means to cover the large fines. Her scheme never bore fruit. Her property was seized and sold off to help compensate victims. The three imposters also faced prison time. In a poignant twist, local veterans lined the courtroom seats on sentencing day. When the judge announced Karen's punishment, quiet cheers and applause rippled through them. For many, it marked the end of an ordeal that had threatened their sense of safety and belonging. With Karen gone, the Fairwood Greens HOA underwent a rapid overhaul. The remaining board members either resigned in shame or pivoted to a more transparent, compassionate approach. Community members voted in new leadership, removing the arbitrary or predatory rules. They also revised the bylaws to ensure no single individual could wield such unchecked power again. Mr. Walker, Ms. Johnson, and Mr. Davies proudly displayed their service flags and plaques, free from harassment. A wave of unity and neighborly camaraderie swept across the subdivision. People who once avoided each other out of fear or suspicion began sharing cookouts and volunteering to help older residents maintain their yards. Real community spirit blossomed in place of tyranny. As for my family and me, we chose to remain in Fairwood Greens. Landon and Emma loved their new school, and Abigail's teaching job suited her perfectly. I continued my duties at the Marine Corps base, and the local community recognized me not just as a neighbor, but as someone who'd helped expose Karen's fraudulent operation. Strangers occasionally thanked me for my service, both in the military and in defending the veterans in our neighborhood. Sometimes, I reflect on the day we first met Karen, her crisp outfit, her authoritarian tone, the binder of HOA rules. At that moment, I never imagined she'd go so far as to hire fake military police to evict proud veterans from their own homes. Yet such is the nature of unchecked power. It can corrupt the soul, turning petty tyrants into criminals. The system rarely foresees such brazen overreach until it's almost too late. But in the end, justice prevailed. Karen went to jail, her property was confiscated, and her name became synonymous with the darkest chapter of Fairwood Greens history. A cautionary tale whispered among neighbors whenever a new board president steps up. The veterans stayed put, forging an even stronger bond in the wake of adversity. And each morning, I walked the same sidewalks with a renewed appreciation for the quiet, tree-lined streets, now free from intimidation.